All right, Fallen Eagles, Waterloo 1815 by Hexasim Games. Let's start with the components a little bit. I'll talk about them briefly. The map, it's got these nice oversized hexes on it, which is really nice. You don't get a clutter with your counters on them. But man, is it really stark. I mean, it is, white. Almost like Waterloo, the Battle of Waterloo was fought, in January rather than, or December, January rather than in June. I mean, it almost looks like it's snow-covered map. But the map's very functional. Everything's clear on it, and because of the big hexes, even though these aren't, the half-inch counters, they still, they fit nicely. And you can still see the terrain. You can see the crust and such around them when they're in a hex. So it's very nice, very functional. In fact, the game's components overall are very functional. If we look at the counter here, I got the plexi down, so you get the glare. Should pull the plexi up, but it's nice. They're kind of retro, old school, but very functional. They're color coded by core, as well as color-coded by nation, as well as having the core written on them and their formation. So, even if maybe you're colorblind for some of the other counters, you should be able to easily identify everything. And, if you're not colorblind at all, I mean, looking at the map, you can pretty easily identify where all your formations are and what's happening there. The rest of the components, player aids, nice. You have these nice setup charts, which you also use for tracking casualties. If you take over half losses on a formation, it becomes demoralized. So these are nice to take the dead counters, put them on here so you can track your casualties on here, as well as for the setup. Very nice. You get plenty of player aids here. You have two of these, combat, fire, and melee combat charts, one for each player. You have one sequence of play, which has sequence of play and also has a rules summary in the middle, which is pretty handy, and a nicely done player aid there. Terrain effects chart with nationalities and unit type identifications on the back. Again, nice chart. You get a rule book, you get a playbook. The rule book, for a translation, you can tell it's translated. There's a lot of kind of, awkward phrasing in it. But as far as the rules themselves, I didn't have a problem understanding them. And they're fairly well organized. There was some issues I had, for example, looking up like leader casualties. I even forget where they're at again. They got to be back here somewhere. I don't know. I had a problem finding, leader, okay, that must have been it. Leader captured all the way in the back here. I was looking under combat, and I was looking at our leaders, and it's kind of back there. But these are minor gripes. The game's focus, I mean, it's a relatively simple system. Was it about 16, 20 pages? Not even 20 pages. You're looking at probably about 16 pages worth of actual rules with some optional rules in it. Playbook, has the scenarios, has some designer notes in the back, which I always like designer notes, where he explains why there's, no rules for, a line and column. He's not focusing on that level of detail in the game, and he's looking at, just talks basically about his, thoughts on designing the game. And who is the designer? I should point that out, right? Walter Vyjovsky. Okay, so that is the designer. Overall, the game, obviously, from reading from the designer notes and looking at it, it's focusing kind of on the bigger picture. Even though the scale is regimental, the decisions it's really asking you to make aren't the detailed ones of what formations to put your infantry in and when to limber and unlimber artillery. There's none of that. Instead, it's saying you're going to make plans, and these are the decisions that are the important ones. As the player, you're going to have these maps. You're going to define where your orders are for your formations and set up your assaults. And And that's really what the game's focused on, the assaults as far as the French side. Are you going to assault on the right, center, left? You know, how are you going to, you know, use your formations? Where are you going to make your push? And then for the British, you know, how are you going to move your reserves around to meet the where you think the French are going or where they're attacking, and which reserves are you going to use? I think in this game, you know, Wellington made a mistake with how he used his reserves. He pushed some reserves over onto this side of the map to launch a counterattack, or launch an assault, which never really got going. He could have used those guys back here where they were to actually push back up on the ridge before the French could get established up there. And that really cost the Anglo-Allied army, I think, the battle in this particular game. My previous game, the Anglo-Allied army won relatively easily. Of course, I botched the French attacks. I was too aggressive. I just rushed kind of straight on with everything. And you can't do that in this game. If you just, you know, attack with everyone everywhere with the French and don't really, you know, put two corps into one section, you're just going to get, you know, you're going to get chewed up. You're not going to be able to take the central heights or really make any much headway. I think in the first game, I may have taken this town here, but it didn't matter. The French were so chewed up in that game, they couldn't hold anything anyway. So overall, I mean, it is a relatively quick playing game. It's for this scale, for regimental scale. It's I think 11 turns. So it's not terribly long in turns, but some of the turns can take a while. One of the interesting facets of the game, and what I like too, is that it gives you a lot of control as far as how where units move, how you use them. But there's also always a level of lack of control. You may not be able to activate that formation when you want to. In the turn-in sequence, you know, a couple of these turns only lasted like, you know, 6-7 activations. They should have lasted much longer because the numbers were high. But sometimes the chaos of battle is kind of built into this. Sometimes the turns end really quickly, or sometimes one of these turns, I think it was this turn, dragged out forever, and the French were hoping it would end because, you know, Wellington, they were able to activate virtually every one of their formations twice. So this is a really interesting way of doing kind of the chaos of battle, as well as, you know, the activation system as well with rolling against the leaders, you know, raiding to try and activate his formation. Really, I think that does a good job of I don't want to say elegant. Elegance overused, I think, a lot of times when you talk about games design, but it's kind of a simple but you know, efficient way of presenting, you know, chaos on the battlefield without having a huge amount of rules overhead, which this game does not. Tries to get away from that, get away from all the, you know, written orders possibly, or roll dice to see if orders are received and have delays and all this kind of thing you see in some games. And, you know, that can be fun. I'm not saying that's a bad way to do it. This game just takes a different approach of trying to simplify it, keep the effect in there while simplifying the rules and the approach to showing those effects in the battle. I think for the balance on this game, I would think the French usually are going to have a hard time winning it. Obviously, they won this game, but it's as it was historically. I think it's a tough go for the French. The Anglo-Allied army is positioned very well, good terrain. They're not particularly outnumbered by the French, and they're not particularly outclassed by the French either. Perhaps except in artillery. And the French have a little better organization too, as far as how they move their army, which is helpful for them. That's really kind of their bigger advantage, I think, that and their artillery. You know, it has these nice tactics cards, which give, you know, kind of a little flavor to it, a little chrome, the ability to kind of change the game. There's a random events, and, you know, in both games I've played, this hasn't really come up. Let me see if I can find it. Here it is. So if you roll a 2 or 12, or a 2 on the fire table, you can get a leader casualty if there's a leader involved. If you roll a 2 or 12, now these are natural, these are unmodified. If you roll a 2 or 12, you roll here, you can capture a flag, which will give you victory points, and and lose leaders. I have never activated this. Maybe one time in the first game I played. I certainly didn't in this game. I was looking out for it. So I don't know. I guess that's just a matter of luck, but it just doesn't seem to happen too much to me anyway. So yeah, if you're looking, I was talking a little bit about the playtime. You're talking about, the first couple of turns are probably, well, it's hard to say how long a turn takes, first of all, because it can end relatively quickly. I would say you're looking overall probably about an hour per turn. So, 7, 8, 9, about 11 hours, 11, 12 hours if it goes the distance. If it doesn't, you're probably looking at, 6 to 8 hours to get a decision where you can call the game either way, I think, is probably going to be more likely than going the whole distance, although you never know. That could happen as well. So, very pleased with the game. Liked Hexasim, and in fact, the next game I'm going to do is another Hexasim game. And it's also kind of at this scale, although in a different part of the world. All right.